New relationships are fun, right? They're exciting, surprising, sometimes unexpected. And your old friends, those who got you through some hard times, are sometimes forgotten. It hit me recently when a song just randomly popped into my head, and I found myself walking around humming it. And I couldn't figure out what it was, and then it hit me. And I was like,
Wait, I have that song. I even have the record. I haven't listened to it in years.
and that started an avalanche, a literal avalanche of memories. And each one of those memories was attached to a song or a record that I hadn't played in years. So I thought I would change that. I'm going to call this one part one because I know I'll think of others after I've posted this. And as a matter of fact, I was going to limit this to the 10 records that I haven't played or had almost forgotten about. But I could easily have titled it the 400 records that I almost never play and sometimes forget about. But really, who has time to sit and watch me talk about that? So let's get started. What friends do I need to apologize to because they're awesome? Let's start with the Alarm Declaration. The Alarm are a Welsh band who had a hit song in 1983 called 68 Guns, and it's actually on this record, as is Third Light, which is another great song. But it was 68 Guns, which I was humming that day, that kicked this whole thing off. Think the Welsh version of U2, and if you haven't heard this, you'll have an idea of what they sound like. The lead singer and chief songwriter for the band, Mike Peters, still performs, and I have to kick myself for not putting this on my turntable more often. Next is April Wine, Nature of the Beast. I believe this record was released in 1981. They're a band from Nova Scotia. They had a couple of big radio hits on this record, which you may have heard, Just Between You and Me, huge success for them, and also a song that I love called Sign of the Gypsy Queen. It's kind of has a Blue Oyster Cult feel to it. If you know Blue Oyster Cult and maybe their late 70s music, that song Sign of the Gypsy Queen really reminds me of them. There are some decidedly 1980s or early 80s synthesizer moments on this record, but hey, it doesn't deter from the fact that it's a fun listen. The next record is from an artist who became big in the early 80s due to a record called Don't Say No. That's not the one I'm going to talk about today. The one I'm going to talk about is the one that came before Don't Say No and released in 1980, Billy Squire's Tale of the Tape. Now, I searched high and low for this record back in the 80s. It wasn't easy to find then. And this record came right on the heels of when Billy left his first band, Piper. It's got some songs on it that ended up being concert staples as Billy's career progressed, things like Rich Kid, Young Girls, You Should Be High, Love, The Big Beat, Callio. Great album. I highly recommend it if you like Billy Squire. This is what really started the Billy Squire sound, and then Don't Say No took off from there. Next is a band that's been around for decades, but I've just started to get into their back catalog, and that's The Damned and their 1980 release, The Black Album. Great album. It's got some great songs on it, but I was really into The Damned years and years and years ago. Really never bought this album. The songs that I was into on The Damned came from their first album, songs like A New Rose and Neat, Neat, Neat. God, I love that song. Good song. But this one does have some great songs too, and it's when The Damned began to change their sound. They were initially a punk rock band, and they started to slowly move into goth. There's still some punk on this album, but it really kind of paved the way for what they were going to be doing with subsequent albums. I'm starting to see an unintentional trend here. These are all early 1980s albums, and maybe it's because I turned 13 in 1980. Wow. That's crazy. Anyways, I turned 13 in 1980, and that's really when I kind of began to expand my musical tastes and the songs and the music I listened to and the bands that I would collect. So that's probably why they hold a special place, and also probably why I haven't played some of these for years. Sticking with the neglected friend theme, this leads to 1983's debut album from the band Fastway. They're a three-piece band, and they were made up of members of UFO and Motorhead. And they had a decidedly kind of Led Zeppelin feel to it with a three-piece band. crazy how they achieve that. But songs like Heft and Say What You Will and the song that kicks the album off, Easy Living. And the funny thing is, the lead singer of this band, David King, is now the singer or lead singer of the Celtic punk band Flogging Molly. And how about this? Garland Jeffries' 1980 album, Escape Artist. It has a punk, reggae, pop feel to it, and he actually remakes a famous song on this album called 96 Tears, which was originally done by Question Mark and the Mysterians. Personal favorites from this album are the songs Modern Lover and Christine. And Christine is probably one of my top 50 songs, which is crazy that I don't play this record more often. Another thing I need to change. Okay, I'm going to step out of the 1980s for a second and move back to the 1970s. And that leads to this 1977 album from Joan Armatrading, Show Some Emotion. Another great album. It's got a song, Warm Love, which I absolutely adore. But it's also got the title track, Show Some Emotion. And I remember the first time I heard this, it was played on the radio out of a station that was out of Sanford, Maine called WCDQ. And it's probably the first time I've ever called a radio station, and maybe the only time I ever called a radio station and asked them who it is that they had just played. And as soon as they told me, I went out and found this record. Now here's one my brother turned me on to. It's Little Walter's Hate to See You Go. It's a 2017 reissue of an album that came out in 1969, which is basically a compilation of Little Walter's 1950s music. If you enjoy harmonica-based blues, you'll love this album. Think Jimi Hendrix if Jimi Hendrix played blues harp. All right, let's do a couple more. I'm a big fan of Brody Dahl and have been ever since she was in the band The Distillers. And when she left The Distillers in 2005, she went solo and decided to do her own project. And one of those projects was a band, it's really not a band, but called Spinnerette by Brody Dahl. Took me forever to find this. It wasn't cheap. I'm super thrilled that I did find it. You could almost consider it a Holy Grail record in a sense, because I had it on my wish list for a long time. It's just not an easy record to find, especially if you don't want to spend a lot of money on it. But it's a great album. It's more accessible than a lot of the music she did with the Distillers. Has somewhat of a pop feel in some of the songs, but it's still got that hard Brody Dahl edge to it. Great album. Now I'm going to wrap this up with two more. 1976's Private Eyes by Tommy Bolan, and 1980s, forgot the name of it, Catholic Boy by the Jim Carroll Band. First, I'll talk about Private Eyes. Tommy Bolan was an American guitarist who played with both the James Gang and Deep Purple in the early 70s. He replaced Ritchie Blackmore. Now, he went solo and he died at the age of 25, but not until putting out two incredible records. One was his first one called Teaser, and then this one, Private Eyes. Got some beautiful music on this. A song called Sweet Burgundy, You Told Me That You Loved Me, another stellar album, and it's a shame that we lost him at such a young age. I can't imagine the things he would have done had he lived longer. Jim Carroll is another loss. He died in 2009, and he's most remembered, at least by many, for his memoir, The Basketball Diaries, that was published in 1978. As a punk poet, he channeled all of that energy he had into his band, the Jim Carroll Band, which was, I believe this one was released in 1980. And there were two songs on this album that were like staples on WBCN out of Boston. Those Are People Who Died and It's Too Late, about Sharon Tate. And I can't say enough about this album. And I've always wondered who the two people are on the cover with him. Maybe it's his parents. I don't know if you were counting, but I think I originally planned to do 10, and I think I just did 11. So there's 11. And if you want a part 2 of this, I've got plenty more that I could go through that I haven't listened to in a while, so just leave a comment below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Hit like, subscribe, and all of the things. And until next time, please take care of yourself and enjoy your records.